Hi, Paige. I got it recording. My name's Angie. Welcome to today's session. And Paige, I'll just let you get going because there's no point in me rambling for 10 minutes.
No worries. Feel free to jump in. I know you have lots of experience in this area as well. Angie is an artist on top of all of the awesome things she does at the business center. So she has her own bank of knowledge in her head that I'm sure she was willing to share with us. My name is Paige Bromby. I'm a practicing artist in Guelph. I also work for the Guelph Arts Council as their manager of programs and communications. Tonight we're going to be talking about art as a career. We're going to be joined at the end by three awesome local artists, two visual artists, one of which also runs an arts organization / business, and one musician. So they'll be joining us at the end, and you'll be given the opportunity to ask them whatever questions are haunting your mind right now. So to get started, I wanted to talk about priorities and what it means to thrive, because the reality is that thriving is going to mean different things to different people at different times in their career. So for example, things that might, you need to set priorities at different times. Sometimes that's making money. Sometimes that's working on your professional development. Sometimes that's getting into the studio and finishing that body of work. And so you can't always prioritize all of those things at the same time. And that leads me into our next slide, which is about time. So in order to sustain a creative practice or business, you need to invest in it first with your time. You don't need to quit your day job. I know lots of artists who still have a day job, myself included. But a good place to start is 10 to 15 hours to your practice per week. That was something I learned in art school when we were, taking 5-6 classes a semester. And they said, you need to be spending 10 to 15 hours in the studio per week. And if you're able to do that, you're able to have a full-time job and a productive studio practice. So finding time, that doesn't have to be 10 or 15 hours straight. I actually don't recommend doing that. That sounds horrible. So break it up, but that's how much you need to be dedicating to start taking your practice seriously. And you need to be treating that time like you would be treating a shift at a regular job. That means that sometimes people will text you last minute and ask you to go out for dinner, but guess what? You're in the studio. Sometimes you might get a phone call from somebody and you're in the studio, or you're working on your taxes, or you're trying to build out your website. The more seriously you're going to take your time for your practice, the more seriously you're going to thrive in your practice as well. So I've listed out here some things that take time in your practice. Me and Angela were just talking about this before you guys came on, and that's that there's this misconception that we as artists spend our entire time creating art. That's a huge misconception. There's about 1 million other things you need to do when you're an artist. Making the art, documentation. What I mean by that is if you're a visual artist, making sure you get photos done, whether that's paying somebody to do them professionally, learning how to do it yourself, or frankly, with cell phones these days, you can get some pretty good photos to start yourself off with that. Promotion and web presence. You'll have a really hard time finding an artist nowadays who doesn't think that it is important to have a web presence, whether that's social media, whether that's an email list, whether that's a website. It's really hard to just do word of mouth these days and try and show up in the galleries. So the more you can get comfortable with that, that doesn't mean you have to do them all. Again, that comes back to prioritizing. So for me, my website was probably the first thing I prioritized after I got out of school. And I worked really hard to get that to a point where I was happy. And then I switched to social media. And I'm just now getting into this idea that I should be emailing people, which is quite kind of the old school. If you talk to an artist who's been around for 20, 30 years, their email list is like sacred. And it probably started in a notebook somewhere that every artist, every curator that they met, they're like, could I just grab your contact information? Just in case I want to send you an email. So keep that in mind. You don't have to do all of these at the same time, but they are all really important for getting your name out there. I put art profiles on there. That would be things like, if you're familiar with the Guelph Arts Council, we have an online database of artists. Any artist is welcome to, our membership is on a sliding scale, so it goes from free to $30. It's an accessibility thing, and we welcome all artists within our community to create a profile, but there's tons of other websites and collectives that have profiles like that where people can search up your work. Business related tasks. This is where Angie really comes in. Taxes and all the other things that you probably hate the most about making art and selling art. That takes a lot of time.
I was gonna say business development is not a small feat ever.
No.
But it is something required.
It is, and I recommend talking to somebody, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, but unless you have a background in business or a background in entrepreneurship, I really recommend talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about, whether that's the business center, whether it's an artist who really has their books in order, and you will meet some these days. Some people do have their all their ducks in a row with that kind of stuff. So they're a great resource as well. And we'll chat a little bit more about the business side of things in a bit. Research. So, and this doesn't apply necessarily to all artists, but there is a fair amount of research that you might need to do, whether that's reading arts related books. And when we get into the community portion of this presentation, one of the things I learned pretty early on is that artists like to talk about art and other artists, and that's pretty much it. So if you show up to an artist opening, they want to talk about art. If you don't know anything else about art other than your art, you might have a hard time having a conversation with somebody. And that's a big thing. So no matter what type of art you enjoy looking at, or if you don't like, and actually that's a good point, you might not like any art, but you should know what art you don't like and be able to talk about the art that you don't like. There's something to keep in mind. Research can also look like research related to your practice, whether that's research into materials, research into certain techniques, research into if you're more into theory-based work or conceptual work, there's a lot of reading and research involved with that as well. So making sure you're taking the time, because that is a valuable part of your practice. Applying to grants and shows and opportunities, that is a huge time suck. You will spend a lot of time just looking for opportunities, let alone actually sitting down and writing a grant application. And those can take a lot of time, and they should be given a lot of time, because it's the type of thing you want to start so that you can revise and revise and revise. One thing, especially if you're at the very beginning stages of kind of dipping your toes into your arts career, you will want to kind of prep some of the materials that you're going to need for these applications. And so that's why those first few grants or opportunities are going to be the hardest for you, because you need to have most likely a CV, which is an artist's resume, photo documentation. You're going to have an image list. There's all these things, an artist statement, that once you have them, and if you keep them up to date, it makes the process of applying to these things way, way, way faster. And you have to tweak them like any resume, but creating that resume for the first time was the big leap, really. Networking is also important. We're going to get to that. That's the second half of this presentation, is chatting about getting out there, because your community is the best thing for your arts practice. And that means, I know networking sounds horrible. It really means just like being present in your arts community, showing up for the things that you would want people to show up for. And that's going to really benefit you. And showing up to things like tonight. Because if you don't, you're going to miss out on valuable information, value connection, important news, that type of thing. Angela, do you have anything to add about time?
I think make sure though, whenever you're looking at all these time commitments, that you're dividing them appropriately. Because like if you're spending your full 15 hours on business development each week or on research each week, but you're still not creating, there's a certain amount of at the end of the day of production and finishing. And that's something that I find a lot of people forget when you're dealing with time management, that you still want to actually finish things. So figure out how much time something might take. So if you are putting together a customer list so that you have a spreadsheet, figure out roughly what you think that was and break that up over a couple weeks if you need to. Like you don't have to do all of this in one day. Promotions will never be done all in one day. Business research won't be done. Any kind of research won't be done in one day. So understanding that it's like a process, it's a journey, and breaking up your time appropriately to move yourself through that journey without being overwhelmed. Because I see a lot of people who start things the time commitment and go, I'm going to do 40 hours this week, and then it turns into 20 hours next week, and then it turns into 15 hours the week after, and then it turns into 5 hours for a few weeks. And then you're like, didn't do anything for 3 weeks because all you do is have a headache. And the idea of thinking about going to do it is painful. So we don't want you to do that. We don't want you to get burnt out just because you're trying to check off all those boxes too quickly. Give yourself that time.
And an important thing to note around like burnout and the many things that are involved with this that they're going to take time is that there's also seasons to your art practice. We aren't machines. We do need rest, as well as things like grant. If you have a grant deadline, that's going to be a priority for a little bit. And that's that shifting, being okay with the idea that, this season might involve, I think the part that most people get kind of upset about is I'm not making art. I don't think anybody's like, I'm spending so much time documenting my work. I have no time for taxes. Nobody's that, as far as I know. If you are, I apologize. But the reality is that you will have other points and you need to dedicate, that means that maybe there's a month where you don't think about promotion or taxes in any great detail, and you are just really invested in making the work. So make sure there's a flow that you have to find. It's unique to every person. There are a million variables that could go into that: a job, a family, other parts of having a life. So make sure you're finding that flow.
Well, and being kind to yourself. Like I know, like we'll probably talk about it a little more later on, but the thing is understanding that if you fall off that wagon, that it's not gone away. Did it just disappear and burn up in flames, and you're never going to be able to get onto it again? Because as somebody who, as Paige said, I have a university degree in studio art and in photography. I used to run arts programs for developmentally disabled. I've now worked through Business Center, but I do my own stuff. But I bought a house last year and it took me a whole year of renovating it. Do you think I managed to do anything in the past year? No, like it's still in boxes now because I finally moved in the summer. But I've got to realize that part of me is like, oh, should I get back to the series I was working on? And I'm like, yes, it's just a matter of being nice to yourself and going, it's okay. Life had hiccups. My kid is a hockey player and is on a competitive team. Like that's going to eat up more time than I'd like to admit in my day-to-day life. But that's all right. Is doing something is better than doing nothing. And if you can just do a little bit to get back on that time commitment, that does wonders for your mental health and all that stuff.
Yeah. And there's things that are easier to do depending on what your art practice looks like. There's things that are easier to do with the other things in life, right? Like the research part, doing reading, looking for opportunities. You could probably do that on your cell phone while you're at your son's hockey practice type of thing. But if you're making jewelry in your studio, that might not be as easy to fit in necessarily. So just be kind to yourself and keep in mind every single artist I've ever met feels the exact same way, no matter what their art practice looks like. Every artist feels guilty about not making enough work at some point in their career.
I was gonna say, like, even the people when I was in university, like I did schooling with at Guelph, so I had Fast Firms and I had Susie Lake and all these people that I'm like, I know all their stuff and they're so cool. And even they're like, no, we're teaching because we love to teach in a university, but it means that we're feeling like we're not doing enough stuff. And I'm like, these are professional people who are making way more than I'm gonna make in any current life cycle. That doesn't mean that they're not feeling that same way too. So we need to, like I said, be kind to yourself is a big one that I like to remind people, especially in the creative spaces. It's like, it's okay, you can make through. You just gotta keep going.
And that comes back to that first slide about priorities, right? Like you changing priorities, set goals for yourself, time-based goals, more general goals, and like Angie said, spread it out, make it manageable, and make sure you still want to do what you're doing, because that's why you're doing it, right? So next up, we're talking about space. So we're just covering some different ways that you can invest in your practice. Time is probably the biggest investment that you can put into your practice. But you might hit a point in your career, whatever point that is, and some people rarely hit it way later than others, is that you might be in need of space outside of your home, where if that's where you're working, or a specific studio that you're working in. Whether that's larger studio space, different studio space, if you're a musician, or if you're a sound-based artist, recording space, gallery space. I can think of a million other reasons you would need space. Documentation. I know for me, I paint in a room that does not have great lighting, and so I rent space when I need to document, just so that I have better lighting than what is in a basement. So, and I mentioned in the description for this workshop that we'd be talking about some of the issues in the Guelph arts community, and most of these are not unique to the Guelph arts community. They're issues at large in the arts community in Canada and around the world. But I'm sure most of you have seen real estate prices somewhat recently. Rent is through the roof, and that affects arts spaces as well. Although we have seen some pretty decent, steady growth of art spaces in Guelph. We've also had some big losses, and frankly, we could use a lot more space in Guelph, and affordable space too, which is always kind of the catch-22, is you might be able to find some nice big studio space, but if you can't pay for it, then it's not going to work well. So I've listed some art spaces here that are local. This is not an exhaustive list at all, but galleries, there's Necessary Arts Gallery, which is also a studio. So they go by NA Gallery for their window gallery. That's a nice, accessible local gallery that started by somebody I went to school with, or sorry, the NA Gallery started with somebody I went to school with. Necessary Arts has been around for quite a number of years. It's one of the only co-working studio spaces in Guelph. They're right downtown. Highly recommend looking them up. 10C Gallery is another accessible one. Gallery 404. Two of our commercial galleries, which, although commercial galleries, they don't do calls for submission, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to get a show in there, but those are curators and gallery owners that you'll want to get to know. Going to see the local art in local galleries is an important part of being involved in the arts community. And just because you don't get to show your work there necessarily doesn't mean that those people might come by for a studio visit, or look into your art, or chat with somebody else about your work, that kind of thing. So it's always good to get out there. The AGG, again, not super accessible in terms of showing your work, but it's a great way to see art locally. Majida Restaurant, they have rotating art as well in their front space, as well as Red Brick Cafe. Great art in all of those spaces.
I was gonna say the one of the brew houses was in a couple of them that I've seen a few artists recently do gallery showings as well. And so
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
another
yeah, the
one.
restaurant scene seems to, because it's accessible. And we'll touch a little bit on advocacy later on, but there are some advocacy pieces there around like your work is valuable and you deserve to be paid to show it, which I know sounds crazy and not super fun and confrontational, but it's a reality. And weighing that, showing your work versus selling your work, because you got to get your work out there to sell it. We can chat a bit about more about that in a few minutes. Studios, if you're looking for studio space, whether you're sorry if you can hear that, my dog is outside. Necessary Arts, as I said, they're probably the most affordable options. They also probably have some of the smaller studio spaces, but depending on what you're working on, that's a great way to join a local community. Otherwise, Studios, who is run by one of the guest artists today, is a rentable studio in Guelph. So if you need it for a day, a weekend, that's a good option. I know there's quite a number of studios or offices that could be available in the York Road Business Center. So that's somewhere to look out for in terms of music-based practices. Guelph Jam School, Royal City Studios, all great options. Venues, I didn't mention this above, but Silence is both a music venue and an art venue. They're great. They're also a fantastic organization to follow online. They share so much about the local arts community through their, specifically, I've seen their Twitter. Their Twitter profile is pretty active, but I think on all social media platforms as well. Again, Cornerstone, Tennessee, Red Brick Cafe, River Run, Guelph Little Theater, Jam Spots, Guelph Youth Music Center. If you know of other places, feel free to drop them down.
I say follow Guelph. What is it? Music Lives, Music Live. I always forget which one it's supposed to be, but they're really great at promoting and sharing stuff. I know somebody who was on the initial committee that created that. So
yeah, and I mean, there's lots of, that's not even getting into like all of the bars and restaurants and other things that show work regularly and have open mic nights and then have bands playing. So that's that takes a little bit more digging, but that's also part of getting out into the community. I recommend following all of these organizations online if you have a social media presence. That's how you're going to hear about a lot of opportunities and calls and everything. For example, I know Necessary Arts is just finished their call for Hoopla, which is a fun arts-based fundraiser that they do every year that pays you essentially. The structure is a really unique structure that ensures that artists get paid for their work while still fundraising for the gallery and the co-working space. They also do regular calls for their gallery. So follow these places online. If you follow Guelph Arts Council, we follow most of them, so that might be a good way to find them all. They all mostly also have websites as well. All right. I just wanted to talk about why space might be important to you. Whether it's, trying to just get out of your house, like for me, that's a big thing, is like getting into a studio. It's nice to be able to set up your little painting set on your kitchen table, but there's having to put that away now becomes a barrier for you to dedicate that time. So that's how space is becoming an issue with the time you want to dedicate. So as a certified mess maker, I prefer to have a permanent spot that I can make messes and create work. That might also mean a way that you can set a boundary related to time. That, like, I know for me, I do not do any work in my studio. And when I mean work, I mean I'm not running this workshop out of my studio. I'm not answering an email out of my studio. I'm not taking a phone call out of my studio. my studio is for making art and doing art related activities. That is it. And that helps me. If I only have 5 hours to be in that studio, when I get in there, that's where my mind goes. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not distracted by an email that came in. I'm, in that headspace. I know artists who do not work that way and do not think that way. And I know artists who have a stricter boundaries than that. Some of the other things that might force you out of, sorry, my dog just let himself in. Some other things, technical requirements. So you're starting to make larger work. You're starting to make pottery and you need a kiln. You're starting to need more tech. The fumes that you're using for painting become an issue. Sound, your neighbor starts getting angry about your electric guitar. There's a billion reasons why you might need to rent a space that's a little bit more suited for your needs. So when you can afford to do that, whether that's a permanent or temporary, I highly recommend doing it. Angie, do you have any notes about space before I?
No, I totally agree with all the thoughts. Mostly, I know we even, when my daughter was learning violin, would borrow space for practicing because living in, we were in a semi and having to have the neighbors suffer through a 4-year-old learning violin with us wasn't fair. We found ways so that nobody else had to deal with that pain. Because it's beautiful as they get going, but the initial is quite painful. But yeah, no, I'm a big believer in space. I don't have the ability to have a completely designated art space. I work from home, so my office is my office for everything. However, the way I have it set up is I have a desk that's now dedicated to work, official work, my computers, my stuff. I try to keep my art stuff away from it, and I have 2 tables that are dedicated, sewing table and my arts table, that are dedicated specifically to when I'm in sewing mood or craft mood, because I'm one of those jack of all trades, master of none. But with the background of photography and physical art, a family that had painting as their art studio for many years, and then a year of fashion design, my cluster of crafts and arts formats is fairly broad and they take up a lot of space, each of them. So I've been slowly organizing each of those into their own homes so that when I want to focus on one, I don't have to deconstruct the other. And it's always the biggest thing. There's nothing worse than building out a large scale collage and then realizing you need that table for sewing a shirt. So if anybody else is like me, if you have the space, you can utilize. If you don't, even just creating, you can purchase, they're at IKEA. They're those long, skinny, they're shelving units, but they're really narrow. I have found those are insanely helpful. We used to do those in, my family used to run an art studio for many years. My grandmother ran it, my mom ran it before crash of finances in the town I grew up in. But it was great because you could work on one project and you would just put them on boards and slide them into each shelf. It meant that when I was in the middle of something, I could slide it there, know that nobody's going to bang it. And then when I'm ready for that one, because we all know how creative brains work, and we're like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then I have this grand idea and I'm going to do that thing now. And then I'm going to come back to this and finish it. I knew that it wasn't going to get destroyed. I could slide it away. It's going to live that space for a little while. And then when I'm ready to come back to it, because I've gotten the new inspiration, I can pull it out and it's still at the point that I was working on it last. And that is something that I've found really helpful with limited space and young children. Having that kind of combination of having a space that you knew you could slide things into as shelving units that were deep enough to slide things in, that could hide for a period of time and come back out without completely having to reset it, is very beneficial. So that's my little tidbit for small space savers. Like find those deep shelves that are really narrow. They're great. And
those types of skills and things that you purchase are just investments. Like if you end up moving to a larger studio, that, if you're a painter and you're able to keep your supplies in a really condensed space, there's more wall space for you. Like that. Space is a commodity. You pay for by square footage usually. the more you can kind of find those space saving techniques, the better.
Well, and talking about, like, I know we're going to talk about more about talking about the idea that your art is your business. If you do have it registered, or even if you don't, and you're just sole proprietor using your own name, these are things you can save up. These are receipts that you can utilize to go back towards your business expenses. There are those outs that are part of the ins and outs of a business tracking, when you're tracking your expenses, debits and credits, at the end of the year. And you can, if you are low, have too many credits, too many debits, too many things that are going out, they can translate to the following year. So you have so many years to utilize up those as long as you claim them each year. The CRA doesn't really like you losing money for more than 3 years in a row. So if you're really far in the red for more than 3 years in a row, they start going, are you sure this is a business? But for the first year or two, that's something that you can think about. You can have those saved up for periods of time. So you just have to claim them each year on your taxes. But they are a business expense. Stuff like rental of studio space, rental of co-working space, having a new table. Those are all expenses that you can utilize towards that business, that idea that your art is your business, especially if you're going to plan to make an income with it, that can balance some of it.
Definitely. And we'll chat a little bit more about, those are also often things that grants cover. And we can chat once we get to that, but something to keep an eye out too. All right, so talking about building the skills from Photoshop to pricing, artist statement writing to grant applications. There's a number of skills that you can help build your career in the arts. Jeez, right. These skills can be picked up through workshops like this, formal education, although I would say that sometimes university degrees don't always teach you the practical skills needed for an arts career. But, every once in a while, you can get some good tidbits. Podcasts. If you're a visual artist, I recommend Beyond the Studio. They're a really great arts-based podcasts or creative-based podcasts that talks about all of the work that goes beyond making the work. So they have great guest speakers. It's based out of the States, so some of the tax-related things aren't super relevant, but in general, great information. Online resources. The internet is just full of YouTube videos, of resources, PDFs, courses you can take. It's really endless. And I think that before you'd ever consider paying for something, I would see if you can learn it for free on the internet. Mentorship, whether that's formal, informal mentorship, is only going to help. We can get into that a little bit more as we get into the community aspect, but that's something. And then your peers, and that's a big part of the community conversation, is that you should be learning from each other. That's why it's so great to have arts friends, because knowing about a call, knowing about this grant, knowing about this show that you should definitely go see, knowing, like, when people come to ask about studio space to me, that's a really hard thing to answer, because there's not often, there's rarely Kijiji ads for a studio space. And probably the best way to get a studio space in the city is to tell every artist that you know that you are looking for a studio space, because then they start looking for you. And as soon as they see one come across their view, they'll probably reach out to you and let you know about it, because it's not always as simple as just doing a Google search, unfortunately. So you're talking about learning these skills. The professional development, I'm talking about, documentation. The reason I put that on there, and this ties into a conversation I was just having at Otherwise last week about, I usually pay for documentation. That usually ensures that it's very good documentation. I unfortunately did not take photography in school, and I'm kicking myself for that now. But good photos make all the difference in the online sphere. Photos are everything for your practice, or videos now, I guess. I'm out of the loop, but getting that documentation is really important. If you can learn how to do that yourself, that's a that's an expense. That's that balance between your money and your time. And if you can do that and you have the tech to do it, or you can rent the tech, Ed Video Media Arts Center, great place to rent cameras. Guelph Tool Library, also a great place to rent equipment like that. So you don't necessarily have to own this stuff in order to do it. And you can do some pretty decent documentation with your phone as well. So don't feel like that's not good enough. You just, natural light, white walls, that type of thing. That also goes along with music base. Yes, you can rent a music studio and get a producer and get a sound engineer to make your stuff sound good. And, that might be the easiest route to take. Might also be worth learning how to do some of that yourself. Website design, online presence is huge. You don't need to know anything about coding to make a website these days. And I don't necessarily recommend paying somebody to do your website unless you want some really complicated things, or you're like, I don't want anything to do with any of this, just make me a website that makes me look good. Then go that route by all means, but they are expensive. There are a lot of free options, but Wix and Squarespace, both fairly user-friendly. You also can just use Instagram in some capacity because you can sell things through Instagram. You can, things like that. You don't necessarily need a website, but I do recommend setting something up like that. So there's lots of resources online about website design, lots of videos. Highly recommend looking into it. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. Marketing in general. Oh, sorry. Skipping ahead. Marketing in general is something learning more about, especially social media promotion. If you don't know how to make a TikTok or reel these days, apparently you need to learn how to do that. I'm slowly trying to learn how to do that. So things change constantly, and that's why the constant professional development is so important. I don't mean for this to be a plug, but I just remembered this. We have just wrapped up a call for our Jane Graham Memorial Award run by the Guelph Arts Council. That's a yearly award offered in Guelph for Guelph visual artists, and it gives at least $600, if not more. I think this year it's up to $1,000 for artist professional development. So that happens every single fall. Please keep an eye out for it because it's a pretty, you can really make some good investments into your professional development with that. Grant writing. That's definitely a practice makes perfect kind of thing. You're not going to get the first grant you write, most likely, but there are courses, there are website tutorials, there are YouTube videos, and more formal, formal education streams that you can take to learn about grant writing. Artist grant writing, not-for-profit grant writing, slightly different. So make sure if you're looking at a course that you know what it is. Just so that you're not getting, you might be really good at writing not-for-profit project grants, but that might not help you get a Ontario Arts Council grant anytime soon. Artist statement writing, knowing how to write about your own work is pretty huge. You're going to need it for a lot of your calls for submissions. It'll help inform your promotion on other platforms, and it'll also help you talk about your art more. And you are your biggest promoter of your own work. So it's making sure that you know how to articulate the things that you're trying to articulate with paint or jewelry or music, also with words, is sometimes a good skill to learn how to do. CV development. So if you're not aware, a CV is like an artist resume. Somehow artist resumes are more boring to look at than normal resumes. I don't know how that happened. For the most creative people in this world, we seem to have the most boring formats for CVs. They tend to just be a list. My biggest tip for that is that most professional artists and emerging artists, for that matter, have an online website, and all of them will post their CV online. And you can just go look at it and see how they formatted it. Also gives you great ideas for what you should apply for, what was their jumping points from, you know, this opportunity led them to this opportunity. It's an easy way that you can kind of learn how they got to where they are. Obviously, people cut things out as they get less relevant, but that has been so helpful and a very free resource for you to use. So I highly recommend searching up some of your favorite artists or some local artists to see what their CB says and what it looks like. Also, lots of workshops. I believe there actually is a PDF for artist statement writing and CV development on the Guelph Arts Council website. We'll get to those resources in a minute, but there's some easy stuff to find locally as well. Arts related skills. I'm a painter. One of the actual technical skills I learned in school, there's not many of them, but one of them that I did was how to build canvases, how to build stretcher bars. And that has been really awesome. Basic carpentry skills in general is a good thing to learn. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't need to own the tools. Guelph Tool Library is a great place to rent, you know, a drill for an hour, a saw here and there if you need it for something. So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, the professional development related to, you know, a different art technique, learning how to make this specific paint, learning how to use that instrument. That's something you need to invest time and money into. Things like sound engineering, documentation is like that kind of thing. So.
Just as a note for website design there is the Shop Here program as well through Digital Main Street. So the Business Center is one of the we help send out Digital Main Street, and that is the Shop Here program will help you create a Shopify website. So if you don't want to do it and you're okay with just a fairly general but would like a Shopify website, they can do it. And what's nice with Shopify, and I did this when I do a lot of illustration work. You can implement any of those drop shipping programs right into Shopify. So you can just say, oh, I want things printed on these kind of items, and you can pick and choose. It will do it for you. It connects it right through your Shopify, and then people can go to your beautiful Shopify, click on those things, and it just sends to them directly, and you get a percentage. And it's one of those like side things. You don't make a ton of money usually until you get fairly well known, like anything, but it is still a resource there that's useful and fairly easy to manage. So anytime you get new stuff, it's easy to add to it as well, and it just goes into that shop section. I just like to let people know about that, because it was one of those things when I figured it out, I was like, this is so cool. I didn't realize I didn't have to go and deal with print houses and stuff when I'm just getting going. I can just deal with the drop shipping. So it is there. If you need that connection, please let me know, and I can connect you through for that too, because that's a free resource. It's an application, but as long as you have a business and it's really built for art businesses, the Shop Here program.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out. I know a number of people who've gone that route. One thing to note about this list, and this again ties into the last part of this thing about community, is that you don't have to have all these skills if you have a community who has these skills. So I have paid for documentation with paintings. I have had other people look over my grants. I have invested in making sure I have a partner who knows a lot more about carpentry than I do. That's half a joke, but you can have a friend who knows a lot about carpentry. You can know a friend who has a truck. That's the friend you want. If you're a painter, find a friend with a truck.
Yeah. Anything large scale. You can also utilize this again as business expenses, because if you are bartering, that is something that's an in and an out that you can show that you've made an income, even though you're not making any actual income, because it's equivalent financial costs. So it can be claimed on your taxes as, look at how much I made, even though it's an in and an out. So those are good things to show that you're it's that combination between being an artist and saying, yeah, I am a business owner. This is even if I'm not making $100 a week in my pocket, that bartering is still income. And that it looks good on paper at the end of the year when you're trying to prove how much money you make. Especially if you're ever like me trying to buy houses or stuff, having those things in are very, very useful.
And this goes in, that ties in perfectly, Angie. Artists make money in a variety of ways. I don't know a lot of artists who just make money off of selling their art, and that's really important, actually. Diversifying your income streams is only going to give you sustainability in your practice. So that's selling artwork or products related to your artwork. You know, like Angie was saying, there are quite a few. If somebody knows the name of this website or program, put it in the chat. I don't know it off the top of my head, but there is some kind of website where you can upload designs and they will like put it on like merch, essentially is how I'm going to call it. Like, you know, blankets, water bottles, that kind of thing. It's a commission.
There's two. There's a few, but like I said, Shopify utilizes two of them. I did one had blankets and the pillows and stuff, which was great because when I was doing a lot of design in color, they pop really nicely. And the other one is more t-shirts and prints. I'll see if I can find the names though for you and throw them in the chat, but they're great. And they're cheap, which is great because you can still set your own prices. So they'll show you what your minimum price is, what you'd make off of individual things. And then you can set above that if you'd like to, like at any time.
Yeah, and also prints, you know, that's a good accessible way to make your art available to more people. Speaker fees. I know a lot of artists who get speaker fees or jury fees. You know, as soon as you kind of establish yourself a little bit more, you know, Guelph Arts Council does 5 awards per year, something like that. We pay artist jurors for all of those. It's not like, we're not talking necessarily big money, but every little bit counts. And there are set, when we get to the resources section, there is an advocacy group called CARFAC, both provincially and Canada-wide, that sets fee standards. I'm going to call it a minimum wage. It's not enforced, but it's a good advocacy tool that you can use to negotiate and also to know what your worth is in terms of your time with that. So it covers a variety of different arts related payments. It doesn't cover pricing your work. That's a different thing. We have a whole workshop about that you can watch online if you're interested. But it covers things like exhibition fees, speaker fees, that type of thing. Writing, I know a number of artists who do writing, whether that's about art or in a different capacity. Because if you've learned how to write about your own art, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump over to learning about how to write other people's art. So that's something to consider. There's calls for that type of thing fairly regularly, maybe not locally in Guelph as much as the Toronto world tends to have a lot more paying gigs like that. If you're writing, and artists get paid for exhibition texts sometimes if you're invited to write that. Those are really rare opportunities, but just to give you an idea. Exhibition artist fees, if you're showing at a public gallery, if you show at the AGG, if you show at Guelph museums, there's a number, they will give you an exhibition fee. If you show through one of GAC's art shows at 10C, those will pay you an exhibition fee. That's something where everybody's working towards. Obviously, some things like arts organizations like Necessary Arts, they're trying to run an arts business of their own. So that's not always an option for everybody, but keep in mind that you should get paid for your work. That also includes, performing, making sure you're getting paid for gigs. Teaching. A lot of artists teach, whether that's a workshop, whether that's post-secondary, whether that's in high school, whether it's a summer camp, or private classes too. Lots of artists that I know offer private classes. If you have skills in a specific area, there are people both from kids to adults who want to learn what you have to teach. Also doesn't have to be related to your art practice. If you've become very good at documenting work, that's either something you can get paid to do for other artists, or that you can get paid to teach to other artists. So that's always something to think about. And a lot of artists' bread and butter is grants and awards. That's ideally, you want to be selling lots of work, but in between that, especially when you're in that big creation process time, grants can really help pay some of those business expenses. We've listed a few in our resources that we'll get to, but the Ontario Arts Council is always a good place to start. Guelph Arts Council also puts out quite a few awards and grants per year that you can look into. So I highly recommend doing a little bit of research into that. Some other notes, and then I'll let Angie take over because this is the slide that's calling her name. It's a business, and make sure you get the proper advice. I talked about it at the beginning with the business related things to this, making your business plan, taxes, writing off whatever you need to write off. Clearly, I know what I'm talking about because I'm being very abstract about this. Make sure you get the proper advice. You are your best promoter. You need to put in the heavy lifting for that, and creating an online presence. So those are the really big things for money management and marketing, in my opinion. Angie?
Yeah, so as the business center, do note that everybody can have a 45-minute free business consultation with a business advisor, and it's a free, you can register right through our website. So guelphbusiness.com, top corner says book now. It asks you a few questions and it'll bring you to a calendar link for a business advisor that would be relevant to your needs. Aside from that, we do have our Business 101 and our stepping programs coming up. So I'd just like to remind people about those, because you are a business, and so those programs will teach you about the business part of it. So that goes from market research to marketing to brand development to how to do financials to how to do operations and how to scale. Because the thing that we got to remember is, as a business, even if you're the only artist in your business, there are other people you can bring into your business once you hit certain levels that they can take off your plate the stuff you hate doing. So if you don't like doing marketing or you don't like doing social media, you can bring somebody in to do that. If you don't like doing accounting and bookkeeping, then bring somebody in and we can teach you how to do all that. But just getting that mindset that it's something that I struggled with for years. So I grew up with a family of artists. My grandmother owned an art studio, did art, a lot of painting, a lot of sugar bush kind of stuff. My mother owned the art studio after her. I have cousins and aunts and uncles. They're all different creators in different formats. And every time I sit down and talk to them about understanding that they're still a business, that you can make an income of this, and that it's a career choice, but you just need to find those resources. So talking about money management and talking about development, that's a development point. And yeah, might not be built for business, but you can find somebody who can help you navigate that part of it. And there's lots and lots of us out there who can help you do that. And understand that I love all the lists. I love the selling and speaker fees and extra, but you might not find all of it's for you. And that's okay. If you're one of those people who do not want to be in front of the audience, don't be in front of an audience. Find a way to do other things. You can write for journals. I know a few friends who that's what they did as a side hobby, was doing journal writing. I did blog writing for quite a few years while my kids were little, like wrote articles for different news groups to make a little bit of extra income. There's ways to do it and to still get your brain juices flowing and utilize your skills and your knowledge to provide that to other people. So, and still make some income. So no, I totally connect with us. We are here for you. We work alongside the Arts Council quite regularly. So as an artist to an artist, do connect with us. I can speak. If you our advisors if you don't have time to connect with one of those, even just send me an email. I'm more than happy to connect with you and help you brainstorm the next processes.
All right, and I promised some resources and opportunities, and here they are. So these are all hyperlinked, and this slideshow will be shared with you after the fact. So you'll have all these links, but also Google works great. Guelph Arts Council resource directory. You know, when I was talking about those PDFs, links to podcasts, videos, special courses, recordings that we have. Take a look on there. It's something we're constantly building out and adding to. So make sure you take a look there. Our opportunities section is also updated monthly. So that's a good place to find jobs, calls, other arts related opportunities for any art form. And if you just skipping ahead, if you would like both of those in your, or at least the opportunities in your inbox every month, you subscribe to our newsletter and we send those out via email every month. So you can see both opportunities as well as events get sent out in that same newsletter. So if you're trying to get involved, that's a good way to stay in the know. I'm not going to promise we got everything covered, but we do try our best to try and get all the local events and opportunities we can. Work and Culture, it's a great job site, and they also have quite a bit of professional development opportunities on there. It is both arts and culture, so it's a lot of like arts administration type of thing, but I know they've done grant writing related things, that kind of stuff. So take a peek on there. Guelph Arts Council runs an annual mentorship project. This is for emerging artists, and what we mean by emerging artists is somebody who's in the first few years of their arts career. So that we have had people who are 18, we have had people who are 70. Your age has nothing to do with whether or not you're an emerging mid-career or an established artist. So that is where you get paired with a local artist in the community to chat about whatever you need help with. We also provide a few other opportunities through that program. The call for that usually goes out around August, beginning of September kind of area. Subscribing to our newsletter is a great way to keep involved with that. And also just keep an eye out on our website because we'll post it on there when the time comes as well. So that's always a good option. Akimbo, if you're a visual artist, Akimbo is the place you should be for some larger opportunities, calls, that kind of thing. That's kind of the go-to Canada-wide, but GTA-centric arts-based calls website. So take a look for that. Ontario Arts Council, it's kind of the bread and butter grants that you can find for artists. CARFAC is that advocacy group I was telling you about who advocates for artists' rights, both of our copyrights, pricing, getting paid for your work, that kind of thing. We cover quite a bit of that with contracts and what your artist rights are in that pricing workshop that we chatted about. That's in the Guelph Arts Council's resource directory if you want to look for it there. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, there's a billion other, I recommend following artists and arts organizations online because we tend to share those types of things as they come up, and that might be the fastest way to find them. So that's probably the best way to find new opportunities would be following some of those accounts.
Yeah, as I say, and if you are launched, so say you're launched and you're doing this 25 plus hours a week already as a business, if you've already gone past our general basic stuff, we do have applications open for our Starter Company Plus program, which is also a grant program at the end of it for small business. And so that one there, you do have to have your customer personas and market research and things like that in place on how the business is going to survive. If you don't have those in place, we run it usually about twice a year, that grant program. So then I'd recommend coming through our Stepping into Business program. That's a 6-week workshop, and we will help you develop all those things over that 6-week period. So lots and lots of resources, and lots of ways to get involved. Like do connect with everybody. I know most of you here probably have either connected with us or connected with the Guelph Arts Council. So connect with the opposite one that you haven't connected with already. because between the two of us, I think we send the bulk of things going out. So right now there's also the Sparks program. So if you are interested, the Tourism and Innovation Office through the City of Guelph is looking for people to submit proposals for a tourism idea in Guelph. They can be culturally based, they can be art based, they can be whatever, it can be an event, you name it. It's pretty open-ended. And so it's something that if I had the capacity in my day-to-day, I'd consider looking into building another kind of large scale event or multiple day conference. But putting that in, that's a free application. If you get through, 5 people pitch, 3 people win a $3,000 grant plus mentorship to get that launched. So that's a pretty cool program, and that's in partnership with the Tourism and Innovation Office, the Tourism Incubator that's out of Windsor. They do this, and then there's also R4, R4. I'm always say it wrong, but a bunch of different organizations that are part of that as well. So local organizations that are here to support you. And you got to remember, arts is often part of that tourism and innovation space. So don't shy back from, if you see a business innovation applications come up or tourism applications come up, you might have a great idea of an installation piece. Or I know Woodstock just went through it, and we are getting, I live in Woodstock and work in Guelph, so lots of community, but we're getting a sculpture park because of this kind of thing. And I have a call out, I just recently had a call out for some artists for that. So these are things that, and I know Woodstock also just did are doing bike racks. So there's a call right now for art submission for bike rack art that they'll be putting out. Unique bikes. So there's lots of things in a lot of different communities. And just because you're in Guelph-Wellington doesn't mean that you can't apply for the ones in Kitchener and Ottawa and Toronto and elsewhere as well, because most of those things are either virtual submission or you go there for a few days and that's it. So do realize that your network can be bigger than just your neighbors.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely why I would check out at Kimbo, because it does have that larger reach for calls of all, I think it's Canada-wide, but it's really Ontario-based stuff. So take a look there. And now we're on to the final part of this presentation, which is finding your community. So you can have all of this stuff, but you'll be missing out on one of the most important and valuable parts of your arts career, and that's the community. So connecting with other artists and creatives is really the key to success in any arts community. Guelph is tight-knit in almost every sector. So who you know and the opportunities that come your way sometimes are, really, really important. It also will help you in other communities because people have ties to other places. Clearly, we know that Angie has the inn at Woodstock, so we can figure out what's going on there. But a bunch of reasons. Advocacy, huge. Advocating for more funding, more public art, that kind of thing from the city, from other governing bodies, from the Guelph Arts Council. That takes community. Mentorship, as I said, that can be informal. I know lots of people who have informal mentors, who are really just good friends, or maybe a couple steps ahead of them in their career and able to talk through some of those big steps. Really, you got to show up. If you want people to come to your art shows, you should be going to theirs. You should be getting your face out there, meeting people, whether they be artists, curators, gallery owners, business mentors, that kind of thing. Make sure you're getting feedback from your peers. There's a lot of, what's the group when you get all together? That like a feedback group. There's lots of groups that you can meet with who can help connect you. There's more formal collectives like Necessary Arts. There's the Guelph Arts Council, which has like a community. It's vastly growing, and you know, meeting people through there, through some of the programs we run. You know, that's one of my favorite parts about the mentorship project, is bringing a bunch of emerging artists together who all get to learn from each other, and make sure that's reciprocal. You have knowledge to share, no matter what stage in your career you're at. You've learned something. You've all attended this workshop. You have information to share with other artists, and you should share with other artists, because and I don't say this lightly, and this is kind of like a key thing, what you're going to put into your community and to your practice is really what you're going to get out of it. If you want people to buy your work, you should make them know that you're making work and that kind of thing. So your arts community is going to be your biggest champion, and I think most people should take advantage of that. All right, well, at this time, I'm going to welcome, I'm guessing we can spotlight, Angie, our three panelists who are all fantastic members of the Guelph Arts community, and they have a lot of awesome information to share. So I'm gonna, Mary Calarco is here.
I sure am. Hi, everybody.
I'm just trying to find, and Preetam and Omri and Preetam. Perfect. All right. So we can start with Mary, but the first question we're going to ask all of you is just to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your artistic practice.
Am I going first?
If that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Mary Calarco. I am a graduate of OCA's interdisciplinary program. My focus was actually in experimental painting. And after I graduated, I had a fair bit of, I guess, retail experience. And it was that experience that really opened the door to the world of fine craft. And that led to a lot of really fantastic arts admin jobs. I was with Craft Ontario, the One of a Kind show. I was the marketing and web coordinator for about 8 years. I then moved back to Craft Ontario, and I was a regional coordinator. The actual space that I looked after was Tobermory all the way down to Windsor, so it was a massive area. So I really got to know all of the artisans in the province. Also, City of Guelph. Then I went over to, I got a grant from the Elevator Project. I'm not sure if anyone remembers that at 10C. And so the majority of my career has been more art on the side rather than the main focus of income. But now I'm kind of shifting gears and moving from administration back over into the actual production of artwork.
Thanks, Mary. And Omri, are you good to go next?
Sure, yeah. Hi, folks. I'm Omri Vandenborn. I use she, her pronouns. And I went to school for studio art at the University of Guelph. I graduated. I've worked at a bunch of different arts organizations, both in an employee standpoint and a volunteer standpoint or a community standpoint. But I would say that first and foremost, I would consider myself a practicing artist and a business owner of Otherwise Studios, which is a local arts organization. Paige mentioned it earlier, but we open the space up for teaching, collaborating, mess making of any sort, music, concerts, private classes, workshops, all sorts of arts-based events, with really the main focus of skill building and community building. And I've been running that for 3 years now, which doesn't feel long at all. It feels like it's still a baby, but it also feels like it's been forever. It feels like I've been growing this since I was like a young kid, so it's fun to watch it grow. But yeah, I have lots of experience in arts administration and programming and outreach, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist.
Is it my turn now? I didn't know if you were going to call on me or if I was just to speak out of turn. Hi, everyone. I stumbled into a music career a little over 10 years ago and have been happily doing it ever since. It has, I say I stumbled into it. I started on the business side of music and fell into being a performing storytelling singer-songwriter guy, which I was able to do as my primary life for a couple of years. And then when a pandemic hit, I wasn't able to do that so much anymore. But I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to work on the administrative side as well. So my daytime life is with the Guelph Arts Council with Paige. I do all the stuff that you don't see out in the world. That's kind of my life, and I prefer things that way. I make sure the lights stay on and that bills are paid and all those kinds of things. And I try to not see many people. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But I also have, I continued to work on the business side of music. And part of that life is I co-founded a conference called the Northern Power Summit, which is a conference dedicated to helping artists develop their careers internationally. And that's me.
Thanks. And we'll jump back to Mary for the question. Just to note to everybody, there will be an opportunity for all of you to ask questions from the panelists as well as from me and Angie if you have questions about the presentation. So we just are going to get through a few questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat if you'd like as well. So what role has community played in your arts career?
Actually, it's been, I would say, a really vital part of my arts career. In particular, I think because when I moved to Guelph originally, I was still commuting. So I commuted for probably, I think maybe 6 years. And I think the first thing I did was, the first thing we did was sign up to volunteer for Hillside Festival. The second thing we did, or at least I did, was become a member of Guelph Arts Council. And that, it really provided a fantastic support system. In terms of networking opportunities, but also, finding like-minded individuals. There were older arts administrators who were able to provide mentorship. Also, I guess maybe less experienced people that I was able to connect to, and I think it's really important when you're surrounding yourself with peers to kind of have it multi-layered, multi-generational, but also multidisciplinary. I think the artists that I know in Guelph, they aren't just visual artists. They aren't just craftspeople. It's kind of like, finding your people, but also ensuring that like you were speaking earlier, Paige, about kind of like finding experts. Like I know people who are grant writers, and if the opportunity arises and I simply can't do it, I know that I can give information to them and say, are you able to write this for me? People who really are stellar installers, hanging up, the nails and making sure that it will be a perfect line the first time. So having that kind of support system locally it's been super important.
Thanks, Mary. Omri, do you want to take that question?
For sure, yeah. I think I've been incredibly lucky, like throughout my whole life, to be surrounded by pretty amazing communities. So I think even from a young age, it became evident that community was extremely important. I like a lot of my first jobs were small business owners who created these communities around themselves, and then again going through school working like installation jobs where you rely on a team. It's really collaborative, or working in a print studio. I was a big printmaker when I was in school, so growing through that community. So it's always been super important. It's important in my practice. I find that like collaboration is also kind of another way of looking at community. Even though maybe you're collaborating with one person, I would still consider that community building. So that's sort of, I guess, like a different twist on thinking about community. I collaborate a lot with other artists in my work. I do a lot of music and art collaborations. But community is kind of like the core focus, and community is the core focus of Otherwise Studios, which is the business I run. So a lot of like community oriented events, a lot of community building. I think it's just such a key part of being an artist. I think that a lot of people talk about networking, and it's all about who you know, it's all about who you know, which it is about who you know. But I think once I changed my mindset from building a network to building community, everything changed for me. It was a total game changer. And essentially it's the same thing. You're doing the exact same thing. It's just a little less schmoozy, and a little more, caring for each other, and a little less like, what can I get out of you? But more so, what can we do for each other, and what can we learn from each other, and what can we build together? And I think that that is something that's really special, because at the end of the day, both parties care a lot more about it. So I try to bring that into all of the work that I do.
Thanks, Omri. Freedom.
Thanks, Paige, for calling on me. Community is massive, and just to piggyback on what Omri was saying about community versus networking, testament to that. So I was talking about Northern Power Summit a couple of seconds ago, and how we've built this event conference for people to be able to develop their careers internationally. What that stemmed from was my partner in that conference and I traveling extensively everywhere we could, attending events, meeting people, building these relationships, and realizing what we were able to do for each other. And we were able to, now over the past 5 years with our event, have been able to bring international delegates over and have them come and join us here and enjoy our time together, but also have them impart their knowledge on the people that are attending our event. And as is often the case when you have people who are really committed to causes, communities, other people, friends, whatever it is, the people who are brought in as the quote unquote experts or mentors end up learning just as much or getting just as much out of it as the people who are there to do the learning. So yeah, community is giant. And musically, for me, there are, as I was mentioning, a bunch of events that I've attended over the years, but something that we've just done here in Guelph since 2018 or so is that there are a bunch of us folkies who get together, or we're getting together once a month for breakfast. And it was just our little singy-songy breakfast group. You've got an age range of about 35 years sitting around a table together, just enjoying each other's company, because a lot of us, when we're doing our own work and thinking about our own careers, we're kind of in our own little silos and in our own little worlds. And it was nice to get together once a month to chat about any number of things, whether there were ways that we could do things together. Something that did come out of that was a show that we all did called Festive Nights for Guelphites a couple of years ago. So hopefully we can bring that back again. But it just has proved to be such a lovely little group of people that just genuinely care about each other and care about our community.
Can I add on to that of what Freedom was saying? I think it's also like exactly what Freedom was saying. That's something that, you know, Freedom gave an amazing example of it. And like, it's when you get a community together, or when you do something with a community and think about it as a group of friends getting together and sharing ideas, there's so much that can come out of that that's way bigger than what you could make on your own or what you could do on your own. And not even bigger just in size, but bigger in like, and it doesn't even have to be bigger in size. It could be the same size of whatever you would create by yourself, but maybe there's different skills that are involved. Maybe someone can make a set for that folk show that like I wouldn't be able to make, or maybe like someone can do projections, or maybe someone could add in like a really good marketing campaign, or there's so many different skill sets and different backgrounds that can add into those things when you just get together and look beyond. Community is also friends. It's like you can get together with a group of friends and then something could come out of that. It doesn't always have to be work-based.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, Omri, this is something that you have experienced a lot, but also making those connections across arts sectors. So, you know, not just if you're a painter, not just making friends with painters. Omri has had the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of musicians, which is really awesome. And I know that Freedom has also collaborated with visual artists before. And, you know, that intersection of many different art forms is something that one is being funded a lot. So that's something to keep in mind. But it's also just awesome. And you can, breaking out of that, you know, silo, as Freedom says, is really important as well. All right, the next question we have, Mary, if you want to take it, is what advice would you give someone looking to pursue a career in the arts?
Sounds really simple, but I think it's really important to figure out a way to articulate your goals. I think it's not really art specific, right? If anyone is looking to start some sort of business, just, you know, what's your game plan? Now, that said, I also think it's really important just to be flexible, and that's everything, right? In terms of what materials you think you'll be using. You may start off being a painter, but there are so many opportunities just to branch out and try new things. I think also it's important to take risks. Ideally, we are our best promoters. My experience says often that isn't the case, right? So it's also really important to surround yourself with those awesome people who, you know, they're not only your cheerleaders, but they're, you know, they're challenging you to do those tough things, to take risks, you know, yeah, having that community, those people around you who kind of keep you in check but inspire you, and also just encourage you to be your best person. And I'd say that's like super important for your artistic practice, but also, you know, in terms of your mental health and your mental wellness. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, Mary. Omri?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. Mary has a lot of really great points. And I guess to sort of build on that, so sorry, my dog is really old and has acid reflux, so I thought that he was maybe gonna have an episode. He might, I apologize in advance. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. The one thing that I would say, I think that's really major is to not be afraid of failure. I think that as artists, and you know, and when I say artists, I mean like artists, musicians, playwrights, writers, creatives, right? I would say don't, like, we kind of have a lot of it. Sometimes it's ego and sometimes it's you're taking a really big risk. It goes along with what Mary was saying about taking risks. You're taking a really big risk to follow your passion. And whether that's as a full-time thing or as something that you do for, 10 to 15 hours a week, or even if you're doing 2 hours a week, it's scary and it's a really big risk, and you're putting yourself out there, and you are oftentimes like throwing all of your emotions and your soul into this creative endeavor. And so it's scary to fail, because I think that often, especially in like the school systems and society, we're told that failure is bad and, you messed up and there's no coming back from that. But in my experience, sometimes failure is like, yes, hard, but it leads to the most exciting things I've ever done. I've failed, and then you kind of grieve that for a bit, and then you get back up and you're like, okay, what can I do with this failure? How can I move forward? Now I've got this painting that sucks, and how do I fix it? And then you create something that you end up loving, because it forced you to do something that you wouldn't have done otherwise, because you're now like, okay, I've got this failure that I have to deal with. How do I fix it? And it also just pushes you to do things when you're not afraid of failure. You are pushed to try different like experiments and things that you maybe wouldn't have done if you were scared to put the paintbrush down. Or, I'm speaking paintings, I do a lot of painting, but it could be media art, it could be your songwriting, it could be anything. So it's like, don't be afraid of failure, and also advocate for yourself. I was practicing that tonight to advocate for myself. I'm sorry, my dog was sleeping the entire night, and now all of a sudden he's deciding to act out. I think advocating, I was practicing that tonight. I do work a day job, but my introduction was, I consider myself an artist and a small business owner. I think that like calling it a side hustle is sometimes helpful, but sometimes can really harm the way that you think about your art practice, and therefore how other people think about your art practice. So if you consider it like a side hustle or like a quote unquote passion project, not saying that it's not a hustle and not saying that it's not your passion, but oftentimes passion projects are considered like a fun little project you're doing just because. Whereas a lot of the time, like people are trying to pour their passion into their art to make it a career. And so if you kind of switch your mindset and start advocating that you are an artist, and it's okay to say that I am an artist, as opposed to, I feel like oftentimes, and I've had a lot of conversations recently about this, especially with like, I have a couple of friends who just recently quit their full-time jobs to be artists or musicians, which is really exciting to see. But the conversations around that is that they feel weird when people ask, oh, what do you do? They say, I'm an artist or I'm a musician. And then some people have been getting the reaction of like, what do you mean you're an artist? And instead of cowering and taking it back and being like, oh, I do also like, I do marketing, a day job kind of thing. You're like, no, I'm an artist. It's a career. And it is a business, and it is something to be proud of, and it is something to advocate. And the more that you advocate it, the more that other artists will feel comfortable advocating for it, and the more the world will start seeing it as like a valid thing to do. Not saying that people don't, because a lot of people do, but there is sort of that vision sometimes. So I think don't be afraid to fail and advocate for the arts.
It's so empowering to say that for the first time too. Like when somebody asks you what you do, I remember saying it to my dentist one time, and I was like, yeah, I'm an artist. That's what I do. So it can be an inspiration as well. Freedom.
Yeah, you've both just said a lot of the things that I probably would like to say, but just to kind of piggyback on that, I think that fear of failure part kind of goes hand in hand with, Mary, what you're saying about the mental health and how that really is so important to take care of. And I think the idea of not considering it failure is certainly important, but I think there are so many things that can discourage us, and it's entirely okay. I've been so fortunate to be able to have a career that is as an artist and as an arts practitioner in some ways, but I mean, I've also failed. I didn't always get the grant. I didn't always get the show that I wanted to get. I didn't always get any of those things, but it's about staying with it as long as you love it. And if you stop, and for me, something that's always been the case is people ask me if I get stage fright or if I get nervous or anything like that, and I tell them I'm nervous every single time I play. I don't get stage fright, but I get nervous, and for me, as soon as I lose that nervous feeling is when I want to stop doing this ever. Because for me, that nervous energy comes from me wanting to give my best and wanting to give the audience a show that they will go home feeling like is an experience. And I feel that there's a responsibility for me to help that happen. And I'm nervous and I get excited about that opportunity. But it's making sure you just keep loving what you're doing and doing it to the point. Sometimes you can move the goalposts, and that's okay, right? It's entirely okay to move the goalpost, and it's not a failure to make a living from your art or to not making a living from your art. Like Amri was saying, you're still an artist and you can own that. It's entirely okay to support your passion with something else because it allows you to do the best art that you can do. So give yourself a break, keep going, and just keep loving what you're doing.
Just to chime in, it's so funny because somebody who's from an arts background but works primarily with small business owners and entrepreneurs, the conversation is the same. There is no different conversation that I have with new people who are in the entrepreneurial space than I have with new people who are in the art space. And it's all that, what happens if I don't succeed? Well, then you pick up, stand up again and keep going, because that's just how it works. Because that fear of failure is something you see in every business, every industry, from small business owners right to the guys who are making $1 billion. They're always worrying about that next thing failing. Like, so it doesn't go away, and it's that failing forward. You learn from what you do, you pick up and you go to the next step. And it's understanding. I love the fact that all the conversations are like, just keep going, just do it, find the thing you love. And that doesn't matter what it is. And it's something that you get that stigmatization to the arts community, but really all the things that you're facing as an arts community is the same things that's facing the restaurant owner who wants to make his amazing dishes, to the marketing agent, to the creator who decides to no longer create individuals but mass produce. They all started somewhere, and they all started with that passion. And the ones that keep going are the ones that understand those passions change and understands that things don't always work the way they think they're working, but are willing to work with it as they move through. Pivot where you need to pivot, grow where you need to grow, learn where you need to learn, and just keep moving. And I just love the fact that it's like same conversation. I had this exact same conversation in my new arts program. I've had the same conversation in a small business program, in a food entrepreneur program. It's just people are using slightly different language, but really at the end of the day, it's just that keep going, find what you need, and don't give up. Because if you love it, it's worth it. We often tell people that the word freelancer and side hustle are bad words. We try not to use those. They're two words that people utilize in other industries to reduce the importance of those positions. So you are no longer a freelancer, you're no longer a side hustle, you're a business owner. Whether your business is making 100,000 a year or 20,000 a year, you're still a business owner. And it doesn't matter if you think you have 2 businesses or 3 businesses, or you work a full-time job and have a business, you're still a business owner. So owning that, I like to tell people, if you have to stand in front of the mirror and say that I am a business owner and I am an artist and I am amazing, every morning do it, just whatever you need to do to get that confidence. But you are a business owner. It's not a side hustle. It's not a passion project. It's not something that diminishes the importance of what you're doing. You're an entrepreneur in an art space. So yeah, that's my little 2 cents on that topic. Sorry.
We have a great comment from Amy that says she's changing her LinkedIn profile now as we speak. And she's also sent on a question for the panelists. How do you get others to critique your work? And the word critique is like visual art space, but I think I'm not a musician, but I imagine that musicians like feedback on their songs and stuff as well. If I'm not.
We kind of just like people to feed our egos.
Yeah, how does that?
Sure. I found that if people critique my art, I get better. It's weird. I always thought, oh yeah, this looks great, and they're like, yeah, you have no dimension. This sucks. Like, I'm like, okay. So it's just helpful.
It's a huge part of, if you go to get a formal arts education, critique is a massive component to that. You think regular exams are hard. Art exams are not fun. They are just, 20 minutes in front of your class, essentially.
I was going to say, it was my favorite part of graduating from a studio arts program, was not happening to sit through them anymore.
Yeah, but you still want critique after, even if you didn't go to school or after you graduated. So, Omri, you want to go first? I feel like you have a specific answer in mind for that.
I think it is kind of a nice segue from our conversation of failure. I think that as soon as there's nothing to critique, what's the point? Like, if you've learned everything, if you've got the perfect piece of art or the perfect song, maybe it's perfect at a certain time in your life and it's the best piece that you've ever done and you're super, super proud of it, and you should be. And maybe there's not a lot of feedback at the time, but 3 years from now, if there's still no feedback, if there's still no progress, if you still think it's the best piece you've ever made in your entire life, maybe there's some different considerations that you should be thinking about. I think that, yes, I have work that I've made 4 years ago that I'm still super proud of, but I can look at it and say, oh, like this technique might be better, or I could have like tailored this theory around this, or I know this now, so I could have gone to this person and shown it in this gallery. Like, the more you learn, I think the better that you can be as an artist. So I think that critique is extremely important to grow as an artist and an individual, to grow your thought process, to grow. I think it's super, super important. And yeah, like sometimes feedback is hard, but if you're super emotionally attached to something, there's probably a reason. So you should probably get some more eyes on it, right?
Amy, were you also looking for like logistical answers in terms of how to get somebody to look at your art, or are you more talking about like how to receive the critique?
I'm really good at receiving the critique because I feel it grows what I do. Let me just say off the bat, acrylics hate me. I'm a watercolorist. Acrylics absolutely hate me. So for me, it's like getting out of the comfort zone. I'm a very introverted person. I don't want to bother people, but at the same time, I'm like, I love what you're doing. Can you please give me feedback? I want to grow. I want to get better. And just getting that push. And I don't know, I guess because my job is pretty much taking over my life right now, that I sort of put that on the back burner. I stopped involving my art friends in my work and, don't paint as much. But I felt that when I was doing it and when we were sharing together, it brought me a sense of like closure to a piece, and to be able to I don't do it enough. Like, I just don't ask people. So I don't know, and to find a network outside of my locals. I'm in West Virginia. I'm not in Canada. I'm in West Virginia. All of the artists around here are either 70 or 12. That's the majority. It's like you're 12 or you're 70. So the 70-year-olds are the first ones. They'll come to you with a criticism and they will tear apart your piece. They will tear it up. And the 12-year-olds are like, you're doing so beautiful. They're not going to give you honest feedback. They're not going to. So I'm just working on trying to expand my network, so that I get better feedback from people, I guess, and being able to come off as not pushy, but still needing it for myself, for my growth,
There might
to grow
be-
as an artist.
I would look online, Amy. I know this, I don't know if they reach into the States, but there's a program run by 2 Guelph alumni called Studio Mates. They used to be the Gathered Gallery, and they're essentially an online crit group and guidance group. I don't know, but I imagine it exists all over. So take a look online. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. As I do illustration work and dabble in commission work, and I am in like 3 different Facebook groups for illustration and design and book design, and Reddit has been one of the big ones I've found. If you're on Reddit, it's not someplace that everybody wants to touch their feet in, but there's a couple of good art communities there that are constructive. They don't just tear anybody down. They'll say, okay, adjust, maybe you need to adjust the nose on that piece a little, or maybe this is quite a little off. And I've found them very useful if you're not good at finding locals. And I like sometimes the facelessness of people telling me how my art is. I don't always want to sit face to face to somebody. So putting stuff in a space that I know people will just take it for what it is and not necessarily my whole body of work and go, oh, but so much better than last thing. I'm like, I don't care about what I did last time. I care about what I'm doing this time. I personally find it helpful, but I'm very connected with digital media, so not everybody is, but that's just what I found for my own stuff.
And if you are interested in in-person things, there are crit groups locally. Obviously, things have, we're just getting out of the pandemic. If we beg Omri, she might open up her crit groups again, because they were pretty fun.
They're coming back.
Preetam, do you want to chat a little bit about feedback for musicians and how that, or performance artists in general? Because I think that kind of applies.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of, for me, it's a lot of community, and it's a lot of sharing what you're doing with your, your pals, your buds, and people you've met along the way. There's always somebody who knows more than you do. And if you know the most in the room, then go to another room and find yourself in the room where you're not the smartest person. But there's always somebody who can help you with little things, with tweaking, with for me, it was recording my last record was in a pretty vulnerable time in my life, and I had a producer who just guided me through that process in a way that I needed him to at the time. Had I done the same record a year ago rather than 5 years ago, it would have come out as a totally different thing. But I think it's trying to surround yourself with people who can nurture whatever it is that you're trying to create. That's not so much critique, because sometimes I probably at that time wouldn't have been able to take a lot of here's what's really bad about this. I probably would have just gone home and said I'm done with life. And so being really careful around that. If you've got super thick skin and want to take all of that, then go for it. Find all the strangers in the world to tell you how great or how not great your art is. But be kind to yourself and be gentle on yourself if you need that.
Mary, do you have anything to add to?
I did, and now I've lost my train of thought. I was going to say, when I was with Craft Ontario, one of the events that we did, I think it was at the Tom Thompson Art Gallery, is all of the attendees. We asked if anyone wanted to submit photos of their work. We would view them as a collective, as a group, and we had a panel that basically did, I guess you would call it a live critique. And it was Virginia Eichhorn, and it was, I believe, Melanie Egan, and a number of other people who are, very used to jurying and critiquing. And I think that was a really good process for everybody to be walked through. Because if you've never been in a room where people are critiquing, I think you might get the impression that that it's a hurtful conversation, or that it's just I think people think maybe there's more criticizing than actually observing. But yeah, like, I don't know. I think that would be a really great thing, maybe for Guelph Arts Council members, is to have, as a collective, have them sit through an actual critique of their work, and because then you also you get to hear those conversations, and then you see it from the other side, and I think it's less scary. It's less intimidating that way.
I was going to say, I've also known people in various spaces internationally who, if they wanted to be in a space, have gone to that space for the critiques. So if there's a gallery space that you would like to have as a goal, or if there is an artist guild that you're looking to join, or something along those lines, there's some goal space that you would like your stuff to be featured, going and talking to the art directors or the gallery technicians or any of them to find out their thoughts, because they look for something specific, and knowing what those specifics are will give you that little bit more guidance to where you're missing and what they're looking for.
Yeah, and one thing that Mary said, that it's not all bad. Like, critique sounds bad. It's not. I know Angie said that it was her critiques were my favorite part of art school. I liked the feedback, but it's important to note that you're going to get this much feedback and you're going to throw half of it in the toilet immediately and not listen to it. But every once in a while, you sit through a critique where somebody's like, I think your painting's upside down. And then they go and turn it upside down and they're like, ta-da! And they're right. And another thing to note is that it can help you learn how to talk about your work, because somebody's has to put into words what they're seeing and observing in your work. And that can give you the words to talk. That is my number one tip. If you are going to have your work critiqued, have somebody, not you, because you're busy being critiqued, write it down so that you have those words exactly, because you're not going to remember them. You're going to be sweating and freaking out, but write them down. Amber, you came off mute. I feel like maybe you have something to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that, on the topic of kind of observing, and that critique's not all bad, and that it can also guide the way that you talk about your art, is that critique doesn't necessarily have to be specific feedback about what someone thinks about your art. It could be guided by you, so you can facilitate a conversation. I often will throw something up on Instagram with like a question sticker or a poll, or there's a bunch of different interactive things on Instagram. I use Instagram just because that's where most of my engagement with people who see my work is on, but you could use Facebook, you could use whatever you might want to use, or email even, and you can ask specific questions. So if you're stuck on a certain part of your work, or if you're trying something, like a lot of the time I'll be experimenting in the studio with projections, and I'll post a quick little video and I'll just be like, yes or no, everyone, like, are we feeling this, or should I just stop right now? Or sometimes they'll ask questions that are a little bit more specific to what I'm thinking. So I'll take a photo, I'll post it, I'll write a question being like, what are your thoughts on adding lines to this specific part, and I'll circle it, or like I'll ask people if they think it's done, or even something like even if I'm not showing my art, sometimes I'll just post a random photo of trees or something and then post a question that I'm thinking about that's related to my art, but people don't need to know it's related about my art. Like sometimes I'll be like, a lot of my stuff is about light and shadows and suns and stuff. So like a question I think I asked kind of recently was, do you prefer morning sun or afternoon sun? And then I think about everyone's answers and kind of start thinking about how that can shape my work and, you know, how that plays into how I feel about the sun and different things. So it can always be facilitated too. It can be a facilitated conversation as opposed to specifically just critiques.
Yeah, I was gonna say my issue with my university, my critiques was my style is very different than half the people I was working with, and that's something that you just have to acknowledge at least early on is who you're getting to critique, because if you hate their art, it's a little bit more difficult to have them have an opinion of your stuff, and that's happened in every space, and that's even business space. If you try and come to a business advisor appointment and you're like, I'm doing this crazy artist and I'm way out there, and the advisor's like, well, you need to be here, then they're not the advisor for you. And understanding that not everybody is your market is a big part of that.
And also you can take that feedback, like, you know, you have to have that, you need to have that barriers in your mind. It's like, this person give me feedback, and like Amy said in the chat, like different can be good. It's good to hear, you know, it's good not to be in a void,
in a bubble.
In a bubble. Yeah. But at the same time, like, here's an example. I had a professor, I'm not going to name names, who a critique one year, because that particular artist was working a lot with projections, was, you know, you should project this, you should project this, you should project this. That was all the feedback. And then the next year they moved away from projections, and they said, it's so freeing to be away from projections. You should really try it sometime. So we're all changing, and you're going to get different feedback no matter, even if you're asking the same person twice. So keep that
that's
in mind.
kind of amazing. That's hilarious.
But you need to keep that in mind, is that you're asking humans who are humans. And
it's like talking to philosophy students, and whatever class they're in that year is the best philosopher of the world. And I found that art history majors too, whatever one they're studying right then and there is the be all end all.
Well, and that's why it's important to look at art too, right? Because you can critique your own work based on the art that you're seeing, right? You can get ideas, and, you know, it's not always other people's minds critiquing your work. It can be your own mind critiquing your work.
I was going to say, and if you don't have a resource, I like putting things away. I put them away for a couple of weeks, and I come back to them and I'm like, oh, wow, her arm looks broken. That's terrible. Why did I do that?
Take a photo of it. That also can remove the process. I take a lot of photos of my in progress work and look at them far away and at different distances.
Upside down and sideways.
Upside down. That can help fix some things in your head. It's hard to put a song upside down, Frida.
Yeah. Just start playing it backwards.
It out.
A question about just what you're talking about right now, about going and seeing other people's art and seeing art out there. Because for me as a musician, it's really easy for me to just find songs and listen to them anytime, anywhere, more or less in exactly the way that it's intended for me to hear it. And I know that that's not the same with visual art at all. I mean, if you've got a piece that's the size of a wall, you're not going to get that from seeing it on your computer screen. So how is it just going and experiencing art? Is that the best and only way to truly experience visual art?
You know, online's great. Like, you know, like it's great that Instagram exists and you can see it, but you can't experience a painting, you can't experience an installation, you can't experience a sculpture in the same way, because it's you and the work. And that's something when you're making art, that's really important, is that don't make it for Instagram, because they're only going to get half out of it. make it for people seeing it in person and being able to relate to it, because that's the goal, right? Like, talk about goal settings.
Yeah.
You want this to be seen in person.
I was going to say, you have like the story of the Voice of Fire. So if those of you who know the controversy that started when it first got purchased, and it's a giant, beautiful, huge canvas that takes over, like, it's bigger than my house. It's huge. But whenever you see it on paper and books or online, it looks like this black, blue and red lined painting. And you get there, when it first got purchased, there was all this arguments in newspapers of, my kid could do it, my 2-year-old could do it. But it was the way it was built, as if you're in person and it's so big, it creates the optical illusion of the reds flickering. You can't get that on paper. Like, it is pretty awe-inspiring seeing it in real life, just by this giant canvas in this room all by itself, and having that interaction of how your eyes work in that. And it's one of those things that the Mona Lisa is an 8.5 or 9 by 12. It's tiny. You wouldn't know that from seeing all this. It's this small little painting. And those scale changes when it's visual art is very drastic. But I found that even with music, like, I listen to a lot of ska bands because I'm old school punker. And we've recently gone to see Streetlight Manifesto a couple times, and smaller venues to big venues with big bands, completely different feel, completely different atmosphere, a completely different engagement, and how the goosebumps jump and how your heart pounds, whether I'm in the crowd of a mosh pit or standing in a balcony. Completely different experience. And I find that translates in a lot of the arts formats, that how you experience it will also really affect how you think about it.
I'm mindful of time. So I think the one thing I'm going to ask the 3 panelists we have is, where can you be found online, ideally, not physically? We don't want your home addresses. You could either drop in the chat or unmute yourself. We'll try and share it so that people can.
I'll drop it in the chat.
Okay. That's great. Angie, do you have any last minute things?
Yeah. My last minute thought is, just keep going, find the resources you need, and own it. Own it that you're doing whatever you're doing. Don't be wishy-washy. It's something that I still work on as a small business advisor. I keep having to go, no, I'm an illustrator and designer. That's okay. It's not. Just try and own it and find the resources. You're a small business. Find those resources too. There's lots of us out there. We can help you with it. You don't have to fail alone. You don't have to do it alone. We can all help each other move forward, and that's pretty much the whole point of community and the conversation, is realizing that there's other people out there to help you achieve those goals. Tons of us. We're here for you. Utilize us. It's your taxpayers' money coming back at you for a lot of the time. Take it.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And thanks to our 3 panelists for coming out tonight. I always feel like these workshops could go a lot longer than ever. If you're interested in, if you're local to Guelph and you're interested in continuing this conversation about, your art career and being an emerging artist, Guelph Arts Council is having an event at the Art Gallery of Guelph on Thursday called Opportunity Knocks. It's an event on our website if you go into the event section. So it's a free panel of Guelph alumni talking about their arts careers if you're interested. And I'm sure we'll have we tend to do a lot of partnerships with the Guelph Business Center, and we love doing it. So keep an eye out for more professional development and arts business related workshops like this in the future.
Definitely. And connect with us. If you want a whole day of going out and visiting people, Thursday we also have a live event in Elora But it's from 3 to 5, so you can come to us and then you can go to the Arts Council and you can just have a whole day of people connecting from business right up through art and all the in between. We're here for you. That's just it. It's 8:30. We're all getting tired. What I'll do is, how about I say thank you to everyone. I'll turn off the recording, and if people want to continue chatting, they are more than welcome to. I don't mind sticking around for a few minutes longer, but thank you, Paige. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Pritam. I hope I say your name right. And thank you, Mary, for the great conversation. And we'll see you all again soon.